everyone, and this is Olani Lay Patterson with Women Healing Globally and Balanced Cosmic Living. Yet we are here again as promised. I give you a little sneak peek of the last episode that we were going to be talking about, which is the silent and unspoken competition amongst women. Well, welcome back to another reflection. And again, now that I really want to kind of approach this conversation very gently and honestly and compassionately, because this reflection for me is not about blaming women or tearing women down in any capacity. It's really about awareness, right, amongst ourselves and individually. It's about healing. It's about emotional maturity, and it's about understanding where some of these behaviors often come from within us. I've always considered myself a woman who genuinely wanted to connect and support other women. I've always tried to be welcoming, encouraging, and kind because I never wanted another woman around me to feel any sense of being threatened or unseen or diminished in my presence or period, right? And I'm not saying that with, to be haughty or to make it look like I'm better or less than anyone. No, that is not the case. But I've always continued to grow through life experiences and relationships and workplaces, friendships, and even community spaces. I started noticing something deeper. Sometimes the tension between women is not always spoken directly, and a lot of times indirectly. Maybe it's through body language, maybe it's through eye contact, maybe it's through, something unsaid, but you could just feel the energy, right? And it starts off very subtle. And sometimes it shows up through comparison, maybe through exclusion, envy, insecurity, performative support, through passive comments that we sometimes make, even myself included, through emotional distancing, or through silently competing with another woman instead of actually connecting with her on a deeper level. And I think many of us, if we're going to be honest, we've experienced this on both sides at some point in our lives. Now, one thing that I have reflected on was the story in the movie that I always share this with other women that I connect with the story Beloved that Oprah Winfrey directed and Danny Glover played, right? This movie at the time, and it came out in the 90s or whatever, and it just left a impactful mark on my spirit as a woman, right? And I was a younger woman at that time. But when I think about the women in that story, I think about the survival trauma that they went through, right? I think about the emotional pain. I think about the fear, the abandonment issues, the identity, the shame, the motherhood, and what generations have suffered from in the human spirit. So when you really reflect deeply on it, many women today are still carrying emotional survival patterns within us. Some women were never taught emotional safety. Some women were raised around competition instead of collaboration. Some women learned that love had to be earned. And even some women learned to compare themselves to other women in order to feel a sense of value. With that, women are silently grieving parts of themselves that they never got the chance to fully become. So when we see certain behaviors, yes, accountability does matter, but healing also matters. Because sometimes what looks like arrogance is actually insecurity. Sometimes what looks like jealousy is actually a wounded self-worth. And sometimes what looks like emotional coldness is actually just unresolved hurt, right? Of mistrust amongst other women, maybe betrayal that might have happened, right? And sometimes women, we are carrying years of rejection and this abandonment and betrayal, the disappointment that we've had in relationship to women, our daughters, our nieces, our friends, our sisterships, disappointment and comparison, or just an emotional neglect. Now, that does not excuse any type of harmful behavior, but I do understand that the root often helps us approach one another with a more emotional intelligence and compassion. I believe many women are exhausted emotionally. We're exhausted from performing, we're exhausted from having to be superwomen, we're exhausted from comparison, and we're exhausted from trying to prove our own worth. Exhausted from seeking validation from men, from other women, from society, from our families. Exhausted from feeling like they must compete to be seen, chosen, desired, respected, or loved. And I think healing really begins when women can finally rest in their authenticity. Another movie that that is a cultural icon in our, it was by the one woman, oh gosh, I don't know why I kind of just went blank, but I'll come back to it. But, oh gosh, it had, Waiting to Exhale. Yes, that movie. Another, you can see the different roles in each woman, right? So Waiting to Exhale and Beloved, these are iconic movies that really give a glimpse into the black woman's struggle, right? The African American black woman's struggle, but women in generally. But, I can only understand my plight as an African American woman. So that's why I bring those movies up. And even in Brewster's Place, right? That's another iconic movie. But, it's a time where we're always, like I said, when can we ever exhale? When can we ever finally rest to be authentic within ourselves? Not being performance-based, not pretending, not competing, just being whole within ourselves. I also believe we need to be more emotionally safe, or provide emotionally safe places for women. When I was in Arizona, I started a women's mental health crisis support group called A Safe Place that I had every Thursday in Arizona from 6 to 7 p.m. And it was very successful. We provided a place for women to be able to be themselves, to tear down the walls, to say, hey, I need to share my truth, and whatever it was that we're going through, and then provide the resources and the support and encouragement for them to do so. Because another woman shining does not take away your light. There is room for us all to grow. There's room for us all to evolve. And there is room for us all to heal. And true healing requires honesty. Sometimes we have to ask ourselves the difficult questions. Why do I compare myself? Why do I feel threatened by another woman's success or her relationship? Why do I struggle to trust women myself? I've had this problem and still learning to trust women. But it starts with me trusting myself. Why do I seek validation? Why do we seek validation? Why do I feel unseen around certain women and not others, right? Why do I compete instead of actually connect? And those reflections are ones that I ask you as women to ask yourself. Those reflections are not meant to shame us. They're meant to help us grow. They're meant to stretch us. They're meant to help us become more healing and aware. Healing is part of accountability. Healing is part of the emotional maturity. And healing is learning how to see ourselves and others through compassion instead of constant comparison. And as women, I believe we have the power to create healthier emotional environments for ourselves, our daughters, our communities, and future generations. I want to thank you again for reflecting with me today. Healing begins when we become honest about the silent spaces, the unspoken competition, and the wounds we suffer and carry inside. And we don't have to do that anymore. We can release those sufferings. We can release the silent, unspoken elephant in the room about that, because the only way to heal is to talk about it. As women, we don't have to continue repeating any cycles of insecurity, comparison, or emotional isolation or hidden resentment. We can heal, we can grow, and we can support one another authentically. Again, this is Belani Lay Patterson with Women Healing Globally and Balanced Cosmic Living. And if you're interested in a coaching session, speaking engagement, wellness reflections, or social emotional learning conversation, the link is in the bio. Peace, grace, and healing. And yet again, I'll see you again, and may you continue to be well and prosper. Ciao.